So I call right now today on every citizen who loves this country and who treasures this freedom to stand and unflinchingly defend the Second Amendment, the one freedom that protects us all in this country. And I refuse to leave the stage until I say one more time that we must immediately harden our schools. Every day, young children are being dropped off at schools that are virtually wide open, soft targets for anyone bent on mass murder. It should not be easier for a madman to shoot up a school than a bank or a jewelry store or some Hollywood gala. Schools must be the most hardened targets in this country, and evil must be confronted immediately with all necessary force to protect our kids. I said 5 years ago, after that horrible tragedy in Newtown, and I wish, oh God, I wish more had heeded my words. So lean in, listen to me now, and never forget these words. To stop a bad guy with a gun, it takes a good guy with a gun. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.
You've been listening there to Wayne LaPierre. He is the CEO, obviously, of the National Rifle Association, saying a couple of things. I mean, for those of you who've been following along to his remarks there, you heard the majority of his speech. What stood out to me, what struck me, it's a litany of the things that we always hear at CPAC, which is going against the media, going against what they call our socialist tendencies in Congress and on campus universities. The one thing that did strike me, though, is when Wayne LaPierre said what we saw in the wake of these horrific shootings in Parkland, Florida, were an attempt by what he called, quote, opportunists to exploit tragedy for political gain. And it's not clear if he was talking about the children, their parents, or perhaps members of Congress and the United States Senate who, after seeing another instance of little children, teenagers this time, being wiped out by a high-powered rifle, said that, maybe this is time that we have a national discussion on that. I guess the CEO there, Mr. LaPierre, feels that it's exploiting a national tragedy. Let's bring in CBS News producer Nicole Sanga. She's on the phone. She's at CPAC covering this. Nicole, before we get to Wayne LaPierre, we just heard him, but we didn't see, before Mr. LaPierre took to the stage, Dana Lash, who is the national spokesperson for the NRA. She spoke at length and also touched upon her appearance yesterday at that town hall where she faced students and teachers and families of the massacre at Parkland. What'd you hear?
That's exactly right. And Dana Lash actually repeatedly said that the toughest questions posed to the Broward County Sheriff at last night's CNN town hall were actually asked by her. She also criticized the FBI and James Comey openly, saying, maybe if you politicized your job less and did your job more, we wouldn't have these problems. She wasn't the only one to take aim at the FBI. You just saw Wayne LaPierre did as well, calling it, quote, an unbelievable failure of the FBI, saying that the mainstream media wanted to sweep the failure of the law enforcement under the rug, so to speak. Also, something that was brought up by the executive director there of the NRA was that the Intelligence Committee, he said, shrouded everything in secrecy, and every institutional secret was sort of kept in the name of national security. something that I thought was quite interesting as well.
Let me just say one thing in response to something else that I've seen, and Nicole, you can confirm if Dana Loesch said this. Oliver Darcy, who's a media correspondent for CNN, tweeted that Dana Loesch told the audience at CPAC, quote, "Many in legacy media love mass shootings. You guys like it." She added, "The media doesn't like the tragedy of shootings, but they say they are ratings gold." And I'm going to go back to, this is a little bit of an editorial, but you and I were talking about this, Anne-Marie, in the wake of this shooting, that if only people could see what bullets do. For those of us who've covered mass shootings, mass casualties, for me it's been abroad, thankfully, in other parts of the world. When you see what high-powered rifles do to the human body, perhaps it's time that people like Ms. Loesch see what an AR-15 would do to a 15 or 16 or 17-year-old body before suggesting that we in the legacy media love mass shootings.
Yeah.
But anyway.
Yeah, indeed. And, you know, he did sort of address, I think, what he thinks is the remedy for mass shootings. It's what we heard last night at the town hall meeting, a real focus on the background checks and the failure of the background checks.
Yeah, absolutely. If I can just chime in, Vlad and Anne-Marie, I can confirm that that is what Dana Loesch said. She said that, you know, in the media, folks are opportunists. She was also speaking more broadly about Democrats on the other side of the aisle, saying that they take advantage of these moments and of the, you know, emotions that people are feeling at the time.
Yeah, well, you know, Wayne LaPierre also sort of blamed the Democrats and said that they were hiding behind labels like Democrat and progressive to actually make their socialist agenda more palatable. I think that's how he phrased it. You know, what I sort of was remarking to Vlad about is that, you know, this speech was not heavy on statistics or facts to back up an argument. It was definitely seemed to be sort of aimed at striking an emotional response in the crowd there. These are all conservatives. He's in front of a welcoming crowd. What was the crowd's reception like?
The crowd reception was quite well. I mean, I heard a lot of cheers and screaming at the line to stop a bad guy with a gun. It takes a good guy. You know, the discussion of arming individuals at school, having, you know, armed individuals protecting individual schools was definitely well received. So was the analogy that if we need to arm the White House, arm folks at Capitol Hill, arm quote-unquote people in Hollywood, that we should protect our children. That was also met with big cheers here at CPAC. And like you said, not a ton of statistics there. You know, a colorful anecdote nonetheless about arming folks.
Yeah, he blamed essentially the FBI, mental illness. He blamed police officers for not picking up the warning signs. He blamed gun-free zones. He pointed to...
He blamed the failure of family.
Yeah.
I mean, that's how he opened the speech.
And you know, then he went on to suggest in blaming all of these institutions and not at all being reflective of the fact that this troubled young man was able to purchase an AR-15, seemed to suggest that because Hollywood actors can afford to have armed security, or because a jewelry store can afford to arm its employees or a security guard, which is a private business, that somehow we should be looking to those examples as what happens in our schools. Whereas, as we were sort of saying, you know, to bring a bottle of water onto a plane, that triggers a huge response from the federal government when you're at an airport, as you know, Nicole. Anne-Marie and I were talking about, you may be too young to remember this, but the arsenic that was found in Tylenol bottles when I was a kid, the federal government said, you know, the fact that a couple of people died from some maniac putting arsenic in Tylenol bottles means that we've got to protect people across this country. And since they've done that, nothing has happened. And here you have, time and time and again, these school shootings and other shootings across this country that are happening. And look, Mr. LaPierre has the right to make that point in front of that audience. It just seems that, as you point out, Anne-Marie, it was very short on statistics and more on just a lot of red meat thrown to the crowd.
Now, I will say to your point about, you know, talking specifically to the case of the armed gunman, Nicholas Cruz in this case, Dana Loesch has said both today and also at yesterday's CNN town hall that this person should never have been armed. Now, whether or not she was just voicing her opinion or citing law, she didn't really specify. But that was one of the points that she made. Wayne LaPierre tried to, I guess, offer the support of the NRA. Something I thought that was interesting. When he talked about armed security at school, he said any American school that needs immediate consultation and help with actually assisting that school and arming that school, they can call the NRA School Shield Program. He also pointed to a clip from CBS News back in the 1990s, I believe it was Face the Nation, where he went on with, at the time, Senator Chuck Schumer, and they had agreed to work together to create some sort of a database to keep track of those purchasing firearms, and claimed that was never followed up on.
Yeah, that offer of assistance was also repeated last night by the spokesperson at the town hall meeting. And the NRA did put together sort of this comprehensive package of suggestions in different various ways to enhance security at schools in order to combat something like this. What I thought was interesting that we did not hear from him is what we've been hearing from the president, floating this idea of arming teachers, and also floating this idea of raising the age for being allowed to purchase rifles. I know that's something that the NRA does not agree with.
Correct. We did not hear anything about changing that age limit. We did hear last night a little bit from Senator Marco Rubio and some of the lawmakers on stage who said that they would not support the idea of teachers being armed. But specifically, that's not really touched upon tonight, although I believe Dan Lowe suggested that there should be, quote, trained armed security at schools. But whether or not that includes teachers was, I guess, left to the audience to deduce.
Yeah, I can just, we have actually viewers all around the world at CBSN, Nicole, as you know, and somebody from the United Kingdom just tweeted at me from here in the UK. I cannot believe what Wayne LaPierre has been saying. For once, I'm so glad I live in the UK. If you have him at the head of the NRA. And clearly, people in the United Kingdom remember the horrific Dunblane school shooting that happened in Scotland. 16 kids in 1996 were killed by a deranged man with a weapon who went into that school and massacred children, as has happened time and time again in this country. The United Kingdom deciding to implement some very, very strict gun control measures, and the incidences, the rate of these things happening in the UK and across Europe has obviously diminished. And so, Nicole, I guess having broken down what Wayne LaPierre said, what Dana Loesch said, what can we expect from other speakers today? We understand the Vice President is going to be speaking very, very shortly. I see the chairman of CPAC is already taking to the stage. He may be introducing him.
Yeah, I believe they're introducing him shortly. I'll be interested to see if there's any place Democratic lawmakers and folks at CPAC and Republican lawmakers feel as though they can create some sort of consensus. We heard some support from the NRA of perhaps enhancing background checks. So perhaps that's a middle road where lawmakers can meet. I guess we'll just have to see what kind of other news breaks of today's CPAC conference.
I wonder if the Vice President will address, because it seems to me the President, his comments yesterday, for a lot of people, they see that as a first step, as a good first step from the President of the United States, Donald Trump. And I wonder how the NRA, because as you pointed out, Anne-Marie, he didn't address the President's comments from yesterday. And I wonder, the President saying that he wants to raise the age limit, that he wants to ensure that people with these mental health issues are less likely to have a gun. Dana Loesch yesterday at the town hall said that the NRA supports that, but in the past they really have not supported that, just keeping them honest there. And the President also saying that he wants to see a highly trained force, I guess, of teachers that are armed around this country. We didn't hear much from Wayne LaPierre on that.
Yeah.